think I will just need to put my presentation here. Okay. All right, thank you. It's so nice to be here. I'm really happy to be invited to this lovely conference. It's the second time I'm invited to something that has something to do with magic in Germany. I don't know why you're so interested in magic in Germany, but last time I went to Weingarten outside of Ravensburg in the southwest for a witchcraft conference, 2018 or something. I talked about milk-stealing supernatural beings that was supposedly witches created them according to folklore. And I just came back a couple of weeks ago from England, from Nasbury, where I was invited to the Folklore Society and talked about love divination. And then I talked from the perspective of women, because it's usually young women who did this in folklore in Scandinavia. But today I would talk more about something that's far more sinister, and it's usually men who did this. It's something some men did because they wanted to have sexual intercourse with women. Many researchers have seen in one of the examples I will give you today, they have seen something romantic in this, that it's something kind of a marriage, something that's very nice and proper in many ways. But if you really look at what's happening here, and I've done so and written about it, it's far from something that could be considered cute or nice. But let's start with some different words for magic. I will start in the Viking Age. I will actually mostly speak about the Viking Age and the Old Norse society. We have many different words for magic. The most common one is trolldom, which encompasses most things actually. You might recognize the word troll, which is also a supernatural being, quite famous from Scandinavia. Funny note on the side is that we still use words based on troll in Scandinavia, because we still speak about magic as trolldom or something like that. We speak about wizards as trollkarl. Trollkarl is actually troll man. So if you look, for example, in the translation of Lord of the Rings, Gandalf is described as a trollkarl, so it's actually a troll man. Other words used for magic is seder, of course, which is more of a shamanistic kind of magic. Nowadays, most people are, especially from the 1930s onwards, since Dag Strömbäck wrote a brilliant dissertation on this, they are quite certain that it comes from the Sami culture into the Old Norse. And then we have galder and different kinds of fyrigera, fjällkungi, or gerningar and things like that. Galder is more like a song, like a magical song, an incantation. It's also based on the word gala, which is something high-pitched voice, something. And then you also have some different names for winning the love of a woman. It's called manvelar or manrunar. And also a certain kind of poetry called mansönger for winning the love, or a song which has erotic content. And we're still speaking about the Viking Age. But in this presentation, I will mostly look at a certain case known from, especially in Skirnismal, which is one of the poems in the Poetic Edda. I don't know if you know about these kind of Old Norse mythological sources. To make things very simple, there are two main sources people usually talk about. It's a prose Edda and a Poetic Edda. The prose Edda was written by Snorri Sturluson in the 13th century. It's actually a handbook for skalds or poets. He was a Christian, but he wanted to preserve these old traditions. You needed to know about the mythology to be able to do proper skaldic poetry. And the other one is something which is only composed of different kind of mythological poems. You have poems about gods and poems about heroes. That's the Poetic Edda. But I will also look at some prose texts. One of them is Gesta Danorum by Saxo Grammaticus from Denmark. And Saxo Grammaticus was some kind of, in some way he was associated with the church. People are not really sure what his profession was, probably some kind of clerk or something. He wrote this History of the Danes, Gesta Danorum, also in the early 13th century. And then I will look at just one example from one of the Icelandic family sagas and a runic inscription. And this talk is in many ways based on an article I wrote many years ago in 2014 in Journal for History of Religion in Scandinavia. But let us start with this poem. I will just show you 3 different stanzas from this poem in translation by Caroline Larrington. And the poem is about god Frey. He looks out, he goes up and he's with the gods, of course, and he goes up and sees out into the world. And he can see out in the world of giants, he can see a very beautiful maiden there. And he usually say he falls in love, but he's actually he becomes horny, to be frank. He really wants her, he wants to possess her in many ways. So he sends out his servant Skirnir to the giant land. And Skirnir rides out there with a sword and all kinds of things, as you do when you want to win a maiden. He comes to the giant's hall, because they also live in grand halls like the gods. And he approaches this woman and says that Frey wants to meet her at a special certain location. But she doesn't want Frey. She's not interested at all in Frey. And then Skirnir moves on to threaten her, first with his sword, and he tries to buy her off with different kind of gifts and all kinds of things. Then he threatens to kill her father and all kinds of things. But she doesn't budge, nothing happens. She's not interested in Frey or his arousal. But then it comes to stanza 26, and it says something like this. I strike you with a taming wand. I will tame you, girl, to my desire. There you shall go where the sons of men will never see you again. I will read you more of this. I will call it more of a curse here. Because later you have, I went to the forest, to the sap-rich tree to get a magic twig I got. So he's referencing the same kind of twig again. And in the end, he stops. But I will give you some sample of this curse. After he shows her this taming wand, he says, on an eagle's mound you shall sit from early morning, looking out of the world, hankering towards hell or heel. Food shall be fouler to you than is the shining serpent to all living men. May you become a spectacle when you come out. May Hrimnir glare at you. May everything stare at you. Better known may you be than the watchman among the gods. May you gape through the bars. This is a very hard stanza to translate, but Caroline has done a brilliant job here. She says, madness and howling, tearing affliction and unbearable desire. May tears well up for you with grief. Sit down, for I shall tell you heavy tormenting craving and twofold grief. Fiends will oppress you all the long weary day in the giants' courts. To the halls of the frost giants every day you shall creep with choice, without hope of choice. Weeping you shall have for pleasure, and misery shall go with your tears. With a free-headed augur or furs, you shall linger out your life, or else be without a man. May your spirit be seized, may pinning waste your way. Be like the thistle which is crushed at the end of the harvest. And he goes on and on with all kinds of assaults that she will have if she doesn't want to meet Frey. And he ends this with saying that ogre, it's actually say furs here. Furs is one word for giant in Old Norse. Furs I carve for you and 3 runes, lewdness and frenzy and unbearable desire. I can carve that off as I carve that on, if there is need of this. So at this time, she gives up and says she will meet Freyr at this certain location, and goes there. And then the poem ends. And you can find traces of this in other kinds of poetry and things like that about Gerd and Freyr. They are not happily married, but you can probably see that he gets a child by her. But I think this is interesting because this is a certain kind of twig he uses filled with runes. He carves them on it and he threatens to touch her with it. And if he actually does so, she will be forced to do what he wants. Let's move on to something else. We will come back to this with twigs and runes in a bit. There is another quite famous god in Old Norse called Odin. He's also very famous for knowing magic or trolldom. He's also one of the gods who knows Seder. Seder is associated otherwise with the women, but Odin has, according to Snorri Sturluson, learned it from Freya, the goddess. And this is something at one occasion that, because Seder is so heavily coded to women, that at one occasion that Loki is slandering Odin and saying that he's actually practicing Seder, and that comes from Loki of all beings. Loki has himself been pregnant at least 2 occasions. But Odin, in the famous poem called Havamal, or Sayings of the High One of the Eddic poems, this is how he learned magic in a way. Odin, as you might know, he hung from the world tree at one occasion. He was hurt by a spear and he sacrificed himself to himself. Then he fell down. Some researchers, academics, think he actually died and he was resurrected. But anyway, he got up and he learned the power of different runes. And later in this poem, he also has a section where he brags about the kinds of galdrar he knows, which is magical songs. And one of them, he says, I know a 16th if I want to have all a clever woman's heart and love play. I can turn the thought of the white-armed women and change her mind entirely. And I also know a 17th, so that any young woman will scarcely want to shun me. Of these spells, Lord Fafnir, you will long be in want, and so on. But he also says that he knows ways to turn the thoughts of women towards him, how to own them, so to speak, against their wills. And this is also something you can find in the myths about Odin. And here we move on to Saxo Grammaticus, because in his Gesta Danorum, as I told you earlier, is a little bit older than Snorri Sturluson. The first 9 books, they are written in Latin, but the first 9 books contain the same kind of myths you find in the Icelandic sources. But many of them are a bit different. For example, Balder is considered the villain here, and Höder is the hero. And Saxo himself, he doesn't like the Old Norse gods. They are sorcerers they are human beings, actually, from the beginning, who have tricked everyone into thinking that they are gods, and they are really, really bad. So that's probably why he thinks Balder is the villain and Höder is the hero here, because Höder kills Balder. But anyway, there's a section here speaking about Odin and Otinus, as you call him. And Otinus learns of a woman called Rinda. And he wants this woman, he wants to beget a child by her. but he doesn't know how to approach her. And he speaks to a certain wizard or prophet or a man from Finn. I forgot his name now, but it doesn't mean his name has something to do with that it's from the Finns. So it's probably somewhere from the Sami world or from what we would say Finland today. So he travels to Rinda's father, and as he's disguised as a soldier and quickly rises in rank until he can approach this princess then, and he tries to kiss her, but she slaps him in his face, so he has to move away. And he does so again and again in these different disguises. It's a smith at one occasion, and she slaps him again when he tries to kiss her. And so he does this as different kind of persons with different disguises until he's in the end approaches her and as a goldsmith, and he's making kind of jewelry for the court. And then he's so close to her that he actually touches her with stacks of rights here with a stick carved with runes. And after that, she becomes sick. So he takes a new disguise again, and this time as an old woman called Vekka. And Vekka it's interesting because it's very close to the word Vitki, which means as actually wizard. And he touches her and with ointments and things like that, and she is in this way mad in a way, so he can get his son by her. So actually what we're talking about here is black magic and a kind of rape stories in Old Norse. This is also explained in other ways. For example, there's one Icelandic saga called Eigi Skallagrimsson saga. Eigi Skallagrimsson is one of the most famous anti-heroes in the Icelandic sagas. He's quite crude in many ways. He has something of a berserker in him. His father is a werewolf and things like that. We tend to have werewolves as fathers in Scandinavia. But at one point in his travels, he learns about a young girl who's sick in bed. And he goes to her and he learns that some young guy has written runes on whale's bones and put them in her bed. So he wants to see them. And he says that this carver doesn't know anything about runes. He has written everything wrong, so that's why she's only sick and not in love with this young man. So he quickly changes it and makes the woman actually healthy again. And there's also some remnants of this in skaldic poetry. So this is probably some old story that's been going on, at least since 917, which is the oldest skaldic reference to this. But I think this also is interesting because it mentions the same kind of thing, that you can carve runes in a certain way to make someone love you against their will. And this is what happened in the Egil saga as well, as it did in Saxo Grammaticus and in Skirnismal. And you might be wondering what I've shown here on the side. This is actually an actual stick with runes, which was found in Bryggen in Bergen in Norway. This is from the late 1200s. One of many runic inscriptions on different objects. Things in wood tend to disappear with time, of course. But because this place burnt down and things were preserved in the mound in a way, in the earth. So there are lots of different kinds of objects in bones, in wood and things like that with runes on them. And this one is particularly interesting because I have a very crude translation here. On this stick, it says, on the different sides, it says, I cut runes of help. Actually, it says botrunar, which means cure runes, runes for cure. I cut runes of protection, once against the elves, twice against the trolls, thrice against the fursar, or giants, against the harmful skagvalkyr, so that she never shall, though she ever would, evil woman, injure your life. I send to you, I look at you, meaning the evil eye probably. Wolfish evil or perversion and hatefulness, may unbearable distress and yaulens, this has also been interpreted as something that has to do with giants, misery take effect on you. Never shall you sit, never shall you sleep. And probably this is the part which is left out, if you will not love me as yourself. And then there comes a kind of rubbish Latin words, magical words. And this text is quite interesting because it's something we actually have, we can actually touch and feel today, that bears the same kind of thinking that we have in the older mythological sources. So this might have been used in the very same way as we found in Skirnismal or in Egid's saga or in even Odin brags about. So this is something that lingers on for a long time, this kind of thinking with that you can carve a certain kind of runes, and if you touch someone with it, that person will fall in love with you or will be willing to have sex with you. So this is something that people in all times probably have wanted to do. I feel it's very terrible, but I still feel sad for the persons to think that they need to do something like that to be able to get what they want. But if you move further on in time to much younger sources, to sources I work with on a daily basis in the folklore archive in Uppsala, you will still find traces of this kind of thinking, because there are lots of recorded, written down accounts of magic in the folklore archives as well. For example, grimoires we have in Uppsala, just in Uppsala, and it's just one of many folklore archives in Sweden. We have, I think, about 10 grimoires in the archives. And not in all of them, but in many of them, you find some kind of charm aimed at making a woman fall in love with you or for a sexual intercourse. The one in the, you can see in the middle there below, it's actually Icelandic. And this one is also interesting. It's one of many grimoires from Iceland, and I think this one is from the 16th century. And I don't have an English translation here, but the context of one of the spells in this one is that the person who's doing this should do a kind of ritual, make a kind of, what do you say, a hole in the ground and put some snake blood in it, and then it would conjure different kinds of supernatural beings, including Odin, actually. And then they should carve a certain kind of paint, a certain kind of women runes. And this is also aimed at a woman. And that person who makes this would, if the woman would not want to be with that man who does this, she will not have, she will not find rest anywhere in the world if she does not love him by all of her heart and all of her mind. She must feel it inside her bones, as if they were burning. And if she does not do this, she will be, her feet will be frozen, and she will never win honor or anything. She would be sitting as if in fire, and her hair will be rotten, and her clothes will fall off her, and all kinds of bad things will happen to her if she does not love or give in to the person who does this spell. It's in many ways quite horrible, but I think it's also interesting to find that some of these charms, curses, or whatnot are quite old. You can find them already in the 900s in the Viking Age, and they are still there in the, at least in the 19th century folklore material, with the same kind of aims. But before I end now, I feel sad for the ladies here, because I only talked about men doing this to win women, but there are some examples of women doing the same thing. For example, in one of the sagas, there's an Icelandic woman who's skilled in magic, and she has a younger lover, and he leaves Iceland and he falls in love with another woman, and she becomes furious because he will not lay with her anymore. So she curses him and makes sure that his penis becomes so big so that no women can ever be with him again. Yeah, I can't find the other one, but that's one example. I think that's a good way of ending in this. Thank you.